Breaking news, the man accused of killing UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson is pleading not guilty. The 26-year-old suspect entered that plea in a Manhattan courtroom earlier this morning as his attorney argued her client is being treated unfairly.
He was on display for everyone to see in the biggest staged perp walk I've ever seen in my career. It was absolutely unnecessary. There was no reason for the NYPD and everybody to have these big assault rifles that, frankly, I had no idea was in their arsenal. And to have all of the press there, the media there, it was like perfectly choreographed. And what was the New York City mayor doing at this press conference, Your Honor? That just made it utterly political.
I want to bring in ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmire for more on this. Brian, first, just your quick reaction to the plea here and these claims from his attorney saying that he's being treated unfairly and the New York City authorities essentially are trying to score political points here. Yeah,
so the plea seemed pretty procedural. It's an arraignment on an indictment in state court on federal charges, so you're expecting there to be a plea of not guilty, especially where we are. But I agree with the defense attorney here, Karen Agnifilo, and ironically, she had a long tenure in the exact same prosecutor's office that she is now defending Luigi Mangione, so she knows better than probably anyone else as to how the city and its law enforcement conduct itself. But I agree with her. This seemed prejudicial. This seemed as a point to try to make that this was someone that the NYPD wanted to go after. The only issue, and I take a very slight issue, is I think other than law enforcement and maybe the mayor, not a lot of other people looked at this as a show of force. A lot of people looked at this as you're going too hard against Luigi Mangione, and I think it might have backfired against him in terms of the support for him.
How much do you think that was based on the support for him? Because one of the really unusual things about this case is that you have a suspected murderer being hailed as a hero in some parts of the internet, and in this case, by some people inside that courtroom and outside.
Yeah, I think it's multiple layers of this, right? So, and I think we probably heard this from other defense attorneys who have been on ABC as well. Typically, when one person kills another person in the state of New York, that is one, murder in the second degree, and two, the feds don't get involved. But now I think a lot of people are seeing that it's murder in the first degree, not for the typical reason that we see, killing a law enforcement officer, killing a first responder. Now they've made the legal arguments to make it that the killing of a CEO based on the response of others is now terrorism. And I think that people's perception of how this case is being handled, not only in the charges, but in the perp walk, is that there is a specialized form of prosecution that is inappropriate. And I think you're seeing that on social media, and you heard that as well in court.
And I want to bring in our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Katersky. Aaron, you moved quickly. You were there in the courtroom when it happened. You were outside the court. Now here you are with us. What do you make of all this, and what did you think of what you saw, the way you saw it all play out in court today?
Well, first, Luigi Mangione is kind of an enigmatic figure. He doesn't express a lot of emotion. He doesn't appear to acknowledge the supporters that were in the courtroom, kind of kept straight ahead, only said not guilty. Those were the only words he spoke in court. Similarly, when I saw him in federal court last week, he didn't say much at all except to acknowledge that he understood what the judge was talking about. But in terms of the state and federal dual prosecutions, my friend Brian knows well, two things can be true at once. He could be stalking an individual, which is how the feds are charging it, and he could still have meant to make some kind of communal change in the way that CEO pay or healthcare is meted out or whatever he was allegedly trying to do by allegedly killing Brian Thompson. So the authorities are digging into his writings, trying to parse his motivation, and that will inform how the prosecutions go forward.
And Brian, in terms of that top charge, first-degree murder with the intent of furtherism of terror, I might be not saying that perfectly, but the furtherance of terrorism, how much are the writings that police are saying they found on him and found in the searches, how much is that going to come into play in the prosecution's attempt to prove that charge?
So I think the writings for them is everything in trying to prove it. I firmly disagree with it personally. When you look at the statute, right, and the statute came out, I think, about it in 9/11. I myself have defended cases like this where they tried to use, for example, an individual who was cursing at law enforcement to not arrest him, and they say, well, that's terrorism because he's trying to influence a governmental entity. Here they're saying that his either his works or his actions is a way of trying to either intimidate or coerce a civilian population. That's the exact language from the statute. And they're trying to say that the writings that he had and the action that he did try to create what we're seeing now, and that's why it's terrorism. At least in my practice of almost over a decade now, I haven't seen these facts used to try to prove this statute in this way. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of defense attorneys saying this doesn't seem to work out.
But you have prosecutors who see the video, they see the writings, they see a dead guy on the streets of Midtown Manhattan, and they say, we can't just have this.
So they're trying to say he didn't just kill Brian Thompson to kill Brian Thompson. He killed Brian Thompson to scare a bunch of people and create change as a result of that fear.
But what did his notes say? His notes say, go whack the CEO. Go do this. They did something bad and wrong. His notes seem to suggest that the killing is the action that he wanted. It doesn't seem like he's saying, CEOs, I'm going to kill one of yours because I want you to change these policies. I want you to do these things. That's terrorism.
Definitely something we'll be listening to from the case. Aaron, go ahead.
No, he called them parasitic. The health insurance companies, maybe in the eyes of the prosecutors, he was trying to effectuate change.
And this is the point that I want to make. A lot of my clients as a public defender, legal aid society, had a lot of strong words for cops that they shot and killed. Why isn't that terrorism?
He went to law school. I didn't even
I know. And we obviously
fair.
We don't have to litigate it here, but I am just trying to get into what we will be listening for when this case starts to play out and what the prosecutors and defense attorneys are talking about in that arraignment today. Aaron, I'm out of time, but quickly, what happens next here in the state case, which is what he pleaded not guilty to today, and in the federal one as well?
In the state case, he's due back in court in February. In the federal case, he's due back in court in January unless and until federal prosecutors are successful in securing an indictment. I expect they will be, and he would be back in federal court sooner than that to similarly enter a plea, and that's when the contours of these cases will really begin to move forward.
All right, Aaron Katersky, Brian Buckmire, thank you both.